Tobago changed hands more than 30 times during the colonial period. Among the countries that were in charge of Tobago, France, Holland, and England. The English had the longest stint of control when, from the beginning of the 1800s, Tobago was largely a British colony. Towards the end of the century, Trinidad and Tobago were joined by the British as one colony. Later on, by 1962, Trinidad and Tobago gained independence from Britain, and the nation of Trinidad and Tobago was born. The nation has depended heavily on oil to improve livelihoods, and within the last 25 years, natural gas has contributed to the high GDP of the Twin Island Republic. In spite of this wealth, Trinbagonians have left these shores to pursue better opportunities. In the 1960s, the UK was the top migrant receiving nation for Trinidad and Tobago. Within 2 decades, the USA became the main destination for Trinidad and Tobago residents. Canada also held the interests of many TNT families, especially after an open invitation in 1967 for West Indians and other people to come and live in Canada. While the flag was being hoisted, the red, white, and black of Trinidad and Tobago, one Dr. Sylvan Bowles had a trust fund that was established to help the people of Tobago. This trust fund was for the university scholarships, award of university scholarships to deserving people. Mind you, the point must be underscored that 1938 was the first year of the Education Scholarship Fund, started by Sylvan Bowles, a dentist living out in New York. This Bethel-born son was very keen to ensure that opportunities for the deserving Tobagonians who were of limited means would be addressed. 60 years later, the fund continues to be operating. The first university scholarship recipient reflects on her experience, Angela Walters Sosa.
There was this scholarship coming on from Dr. Bowles, but before that, we had to compete in an open field with Trinidad. So that Dr. Sylvan Bowles was really an opening, an eye-opener, opener of possibilities. There were no stipulations, but I made a verbal promise to Mr. Leonard Marlowe. I think he's the person who was in charge of Dr. Bowles' estate. I made a verbal promise to come back to Tobago and give back to my island. I taught at Bishop's High School, my alma mater. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed teaching, and it was quite an experience because to me, I hope I made French come alive for the children. I did. And our strength in the department grew when Marva Scipio Henry came back. She came back to, in fact, all of us who went in the first years came back to serve. Claudette Allard, Miss Arnold, Yvette Arnold Donaldson, a whole list of us, we came back to serve. And then we were in great demand. Scholarship recipients. Yes, indeed, as Bowles Scholarship recipients. And we were indeed grateful because it was a way forward for us. And we came back to make sure that Tobago moved forward. In fact, at one point, a lot of the staff at Bishop's High School were the recipients of Bowles scholarships. We were aware of the fact that we had to awaken people that hard work and harder work, opportunities were there for the taking, and everybody came together and worked indeed to make that possible. So there was a greater awareness because we tended to be quite laid back in Tobago, you know. And I do believe that people were not aware of the opportunities that existed. Because before that, the only scholarship that I know from Tobago was the Tobago Benevolent Society Scholarship, where Tobagonians living in New York, if I remember correctly, would select someone from Tobago and sponsor them. If you didn't have the means, you were going to suffer a bit. And the Bowls coming in, and two, it gave us the vigor to come back and work and try to break into the national arena and get scholarships, which we did. I got the impression that it expanded its wings, but I do not know at what time Bowls scholarships were expanded to a greater crowd, a greater set of opportunities for others. Eventually, the results would have had to go through UE. So you forwarded your CAPE results, your A-level results to UE, as far as I remember, and they assessed it. They assessed that result and decided who should be awarded the scholarship.
But by saying CAPE now, you're talking about a more modern time.
Yes.
Because the GC was the system before.
But I think the UE came into it. UE came into it because in trying to get information, you know, I got the feeling from the principal and vice principal that UE at some point took over that, and they are the ones who were in charge of identifying, because now I understand that there are 10 scholarships and 10 bursaries, and UE is the one that says who are the winners. In 1998, I know there was a function that commemorated him, said thanks to him, his family, and that was in 1998 because he started to really spread his wings as a benevolent person towards us from 1938, because he did not start being a philanthropist just with tertiary education, because I think His Excellency, the Honorable A.N.R. Robinson, our past president, he would have been the first one to receive a secondary school scholarship due to Mr. Dr. Sylvan Bowles' benevolence. So they were commemorating 1938 to 1990, 60 years. Can you imagine that?
In 1998, Dr. Sylvan Bowles was posthumously awarded the nation's highest honor, the Trinity Cross. Suzette James, a scholarship winner and current vice principal of Bishop's High School, offered this insight.
I did not know until my final year that I was a recipient of the Bowles Scholarship. It was that I did go to Mona. I chose Mona because of the library studies initially, and then I went into foreign languages. And one day a lecturer just walked up to me on campus and asked me if I knew that I was to receive this scholarship, and it was there pending for the last 2 years or something like that. That was my thing. I don't know the amount because my father, being in Jamaica, my father collected on my behalf. I never knew, and of course, patriarchally as it is, I never knew how much I earned from that scholarship. But it did make a difference, I know, because otherwise it would not have happened for me as able to pay back loans and that kind of thing, yes. So it was a great gift. I came home in May of '94 and I was in Bishop's teaching right after that. Not knowing that there was a whole band of persons who would have received gifts like this. It's only as a teacher that I would have heard about the process for the Bowles Scholarship and that kind of a thing. And I have always since then remained looking, you know, trying to find out information about it. The impact was tremendous enough because on the island, there was only Bishop's High School doing French. That's the first part. And I eventually acceded to do foreign languages and do French, not knowing anything about anything, right? So just, I tell it by God, Miss Sosa would have been my teacher. She never told me about Bowles, but she was impactful enough. After she got what she got and came back to give to me, she taught, and then I went off to UE. I did my degree in French and Spanish and library sciences. And from there, I made it my life dream to come back to Bishop's High School and do the same as Miss Sosa would have done for me. And luckily for me, the space was there because when I came, the French teacher had just died. So I walked straight in. I never did an interview or anything like that, and I was placed here, and since then it's 28 years of me doing French. So they were good enough to have created a program where they documented all the names of the persons that they knew had gotten this scholarship. And so we came up, I think it was a Sunday afternoon at Bishop's here, and I remember Ms. Sosa being the first recipient having to speak about the award. And out of that, after that, we elected a cocktail and we were able to hobnob with each other and see, well, so many of us benefit from this man, and none of us seem to know anything about the man, but a lot of talk, because of course since that time nothing has happened since for us to meet again. At a school, I know I have started meetings where we have planned to have a wall of Bowles Scholarship honoring him and honoring other people with the Bowles Scholarship. Well, we do have a house named for him, the greenhouse. And I know the alumni at one time we created boards that documented his honor, his details. Those are in the library right now. I'm not sure, you can probably go and see those. Apart from that, I know too, because of sports and Bishop's High School is big in house. So at some point, this would have been in 2010 probably, the Bowles House persons, the management, did reach out to Cheryl Bowles of Shemer because they wanted money to sponsor March Pass or something. And out of that, that lady came aboard and started sponsoring prizes and having a link with us. Well, they call it the Bowles Hall, but we don't even meet there. It is officially the Bowles Hall, yes. I have personal thing there because my daughter did get a bursary. That's when I knew that bursaries existed from Bowles. I knew about the scholarships. And it is then as well that when I heard it, I started tracking back because a lot of our students obviously would get them, and you would hear, yes, the bursaries for 1 year, $10,000 payment versus a scholarship that was 3 years and that kind of thing. So yes, that would have.
What year did
she would have been in 5 years ago. Okay. 5 years ago. Yeah, but even at school here, we do have people who are Bowles scholars. We have, when I did the research yesterday after you spoke with me, 5 people came forward and said yes, they had
5 members of staff.
5 members of staff. They had also had the opportunity to have a Bowles scholar. And weirdly enough, there was one person who was offered it and did not take it. Yes, I found that interesting. I never knew people refused, but then he explained that the THA scholarship had come on at some point because that doesn't exist really right now. And that was like 3 times the amount. So that was his reason, because if you're on scholarship, you cannot take 2, you know, so yeah. It has been mind-boggling that my mother is from Bethel. That's how I know about Bowles and the Bethel part. And she remembers the family name in that village. And you know, Bethel being what it gives in Tobago, it has a connotation of being less. And she always celebrates this man to me, even before scholar and all of that, you know. And for me, I would want more to be done to honor this gentleman and all his philanthropy. I have heard about him doing stuff in the US and having all this reach all over the world. And people like us don't seem to be networked enough. We don't know about each other, right? We don't talk about it either. Because even with the staff, some of them I never knew that they would have been scholars, right? So yes, we do need to do more to celebrate our own, show off.
In the 1970s, Professor Hollis Lynch, a Tobago-born son from John Dial, was involved in a commercial purchase on the island when he bought Richmond Great House. That property, 5 acres, represented the first commercial transaction by a person from the diaspora. And it happened 3 years after the Black Power Revolution. Continuing into the 1980s, we had this situation with the Trinidad and Tobago Medical Relief Incorporated. That group out of California journeyed to Tobago to conduct medical missions, and their live wire was Mervyn O'Neill.
We started health missions in Tobago somewhere around the early to mid 1980s. We brought a combination of Tobago doctors along with American doctors, and we did health missions here in Tobago. Coming out of these were some interesting studies. Of course, we were accommodated by the THA. So we held meetings with the THA. They accommodated us by setting up transportation throughout the various villages. But one of the focus of our work was around the question of cancers in Tobago. We, and I would dare say Dr. Small, Dr. Warner, and Dr. Modest, we took back with us blood from people here on Tobago and did analyses on them in the United States. And we found that there was an incidence, a 26% incidence of prostate cancer among men in Tobago. Dr. Modest, she also found a high incidence of breast cancer among women in Tobago. Dr. Modest started a mammogram clinic in Bell Garden to address that issue. Dr. Small, Dr. Clarence Warner, I mean, not pumping myself up in any way, but I as head of the mission, they submitted their report to me and I sent it to the THA. We consciously became involved with the Trinidad and Tobago Medical Relief Committee under several headings. One, if we speak of brain drain, these are your intellectuals who have graduated abroad. The Trinidad and Tobago Medical Relief Committee is saying these people have made their lives abroad, but how can they send something back home? So other than coming physically with those missions, the Trinidad and Tobago Medical Relief Committee and similar other organizations was designed to be realistic. Well, these people are not coming back here to work on a daily basis, but how can we derive benefits from them? And it's not only medical missions coming to Tobago and coming to the island that we were involved in or consciously involved in. The Trinidad and Tobago Medical Relief Committee has been a party to situations where citizens of Trinidad and Tobago arriving in the United States and becoming ill, though they were not, because they're not citizens of America and they were on visitors visa, we were able to refer them to hospitals there using our status in the community as upstanding organization representing these people. By 2000, we had moved now to education, and we brought young people to Tobago to connect with young people here, in Tobago. I would dare say, yes, those young people that came with us, they went to bishops and the bishops' people danced with them and they danced with the people and so forth. But it was really a matter of connection and connectivity. Let me say that even a Tobagonian, her name Sophie Abraham, she was the president of an international high school. And she did contribute to American children coming here to Tobago. And now the intention was to make that connection. It's an educational thing. You see my culture, I see your culture, young people of the same age, we connect, and so forth. I would dare say that there was some wonderful reports coming back to us when we went back to the United States from the parents of those children who came with us.
Structured biennial trips in the summer were advanced by Trinbago Progressive Association, formerly the Tobago Progressive Association. This particular organization, led by George Phillips, a medical doctor, raised funds in New York to acquire equipment which they donated to households and organizations. Stephen Isaac, its current president, reveals the origin and activities that reflects the footprint of Trinbago Progressive Association in Tobago.
The mission of Tobago Progressive at that time would have been a mission of giving back to Tobago. And from what I gathered, it started with a little meeting. The names of the individuals were mentioned at Hanson Place Church, downtown Brooklyn. And the discussion was, we out here, we're doing pretty good. Why don't we give something back to Tobago? And it was decided to get some barrels. That was an easy way to start. Put some stuff in some barrels, ship them to Tobago that could be distributed, and they just built on that. You must have something sustainable to be able to carry out that. That something is a project, and that project would require funds. So obviously you had to have activities, and I recommend that anytime you're doing you have something like that, you need to have a sustainable source of funding. Yes, people will contribute, but at the beginning they were using like concerts mainly, right? And we moved on from concerts, started having what we would call luncheons, awards luncheons. In addition to the award luncheon, we had gospel brunch. So those were the two main sources of funding, in addition to the contributions that were made by people. And these contributions were extremely significant. When you're talking about hospital beds, Hoyer lifts, wheelchairs, walkers, commodes, I mean, just name it, clothes, food stuff in abundance. But you had to have money to ship those things. Hence the reason I emphasize how important it was to have a source of funding, because yes, you will get the items, but then they got to ship. You got to have barrels, you got to have those commercial bins, you got to have crates to send this. So that was needed. And that was the source of funding that started back then. And since then, we've had 25 awards luncheon, which would have included at those luncheons individuals from Tobago, over the years from Mr. London as Secretary for Health, going by, and I could name probably 10, 15 of these individuals who have gone through as Chief Secretary, as Secretary for Health, the last being Agatha Carrington in 2018, that would have been keynote speakers at our luncheons. The last one that we had with Agatha Carrington, who was the keynote speaker, would have been upwards of 300 people. Okay. So we would have the hall, a massive hall. We would have people coming out, people donating. Some people wouldn't come, but they would purchase tickets and things like that. The Gospel Brunch was an annual thing, as I explained. I was explaining to them the Gospel Brunch would be business places from Trinidad and from Tobago, based in New York, would provide the items for the Gospel Brunches. So we could consider those Gospel Brunches as being done with very little out of pocket. We were able to, because I got to know Dr. Daniel Beckles, who I think you're familiar with, who is double-boarded, who is among the top 10 cardiovascular surgeons in the globe. He would have had access, and working at SUNY downstate and having as an electrician, having the opportunity to go to every area, in the students' area, wherever. It means that everybody around would know me. So it was very easy to get nurses, it was easy to get doctors, it was easy to get people in any field. And then, of course, coming to Trinidad, there would be people from home who would want to volunteer. So this basically would have provided the thing. But then, we have to come in, we must have a source here to send the things in. And this is where people like Mr. Diamond Andrews and Vicky DeCoto and this Canaan Seventh-day Adventist Church would come in that particular area, because you can't come in to do this stuff if you don't have somebody significant here or people who would be able to receive the items, to utilize for themselves, and also to hold some for us that we can actually do, and to help us with lunch and whatever facilities we needed, the In Trinidad, the South Caribbean Conference. In Tobago, it was the Tobago Mission of Seventh-day Adventists and the churches, Good News and Canaan Church and Mount St. George and these churches. Medical mission trip would look like 2 weeks, all right? 2 weeks, we would come in on a Sunday pretty much. Well, Sylvan Henry, the public relations officer, we would come in like the week before to do the groundwork, to have things laid out. But when we would come in on a Sunday, the first thing that would happen is that the Tobago House of Assembly would host a reception for us. That has always been the case. This would be held on the Sunday evening, and then on the Monday, we would use that Monday now to put out. So if we were doing 6, 7 health fairs, we would have everything put out for all the different villages and areas that we go in. I would get in touch with, well, Diamond and the other folks here. They would organize the Tobago mission for Tobago, Vicky Dikoto, for Trinidad. Well, we started with Verna McPherson. She was actually the health secretary back then. We had cardiovascular, we had dental, we had diabetes, and we had glasses, options. We had just about any service. We had psychologists, psychiatrists. I mean, we had medical missionaries who would cover the 8 laws of health: nutrition, exercise, water, sunshine, temperance, air, rest, and trust in God. So we had all those aspects. So there's hardly anything that would be out there that was needed that we would not have provided at different times.
Distribution of medical supplies sent from the USA were in later years handled by ASI, an arm of the Adventist faith. Diamond Andrews, its principal figure in Tobago, explains.
Well, I would say like about for the past 15, 20 years, we had been working along with Trinbago, and they had been doing a really good job in bringing stuff to us. ASI I think is the biggest recipient of the items that they bring into the country. Who ASI is the Adventist Layperson Service and Industry, and that is the core of businessmen and professionals in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. When Trinbago came on board and they began to talk with us, they had been coming before we even got involved. They had been doing spot meetings, spot checks for people and things like that in Moriah and Charlottesville, all over Tobago. And so when they said, listen, we want to bring some stuff in Tobago so that somebody could be here to take care of this stuff, we say, okay, bring it to us. And so they send stuff to us 1 time, 2 times, we're talking about beds and pampers and walkers and wheelchairs and things like that. They bring it to us, and then we go on the road, find people, we put it up on our media, which is ASI Media, Tobago ASI Media, and then people will call us up. Can I have a wheelchair? How much it costs? How much I have to pay for rent? And you don't have to pay anything. All you need to do is to fill out our form. So we know where the wheelchair is, where the bed is, whichever the equipment. We know which light pole. We have the telephone numbers of the people. We have the names of the sick person and the name of the person who come to receive it. And so we have a record of all those. And we get along pretty all right with that. And we have been doing really well. Never charge anybody for anything. It's a free program. Anybody come and get what they want. And we know if the person die, God forbid, or if the person get better, you return the item to us.
Our Boy Steel Orchestra was able to tour the United States in the 1980s because of the effort of Patrick Arnold, a co-founder of the band back in the 1950s. While he was domiciled in the USA, he was able to arrange for gigs for that steel band in San Francisco, as well as other places in the USA, especially on the university circuit. The efforts of Patrick Arnold included arrangements for that group to actually put an album into the network. Pan Night and Day in 1986 was the first album that group produced. And it was also the very first time that a steel band was able to find a ranking on Billboard charts. In 1989, our boys also, with the help of Patrick Arnold, produced a second album, Pan Progress. Later on, it was recognized that it was best to maintain a stateside in the US. So our boys had a chapter in San Francisco. The medical mission to Tobago especially deepened with members of the TNT Diaspora, organizing surgical procedures within the island's sole hospital. In one instance, arthroscopic surgeries were performed with a team from Connecticut, USA. The organizer of one of those missions that performed surgery at the island's old hospital shares her experience.
It's there that I've reached out to the physicians there and the surgeons with whom I worked, having visited Tobago and realized the challenges that people were having there with respect to health, and encouraged them to join me on an expedition to do some medical work on the island. At that time, the surgical suite, the theater at the old hospital at Fort George, was not functional. In fact, they were doing emergency surgeries only downstairs at the triage area where we called casualty. That was in 2000. Okay, I started. That was in 2001, or even 2000, between 2000 and 2001. And that's where my first medical team, that's when my first medical team came to Tobago and to conduct medical missions. But prior to that, while I was here in the US with that team, I gathered a lot of supplies, medical supplies and equipment. But one thing I must say, before I was able to really get the attention of the Tobago side of things, because it was very difficult from the government standpoint to kind of respond to you as a person in the diaspora that you wanted to give back. I think in those days they did not have an affinity for what the diaspora could contribute. And therefore, I needed to reach out to persons on the ground. And two of the key persons were Dr. Remy and Dr. Victor Wheeler. And that's when I got the ball rolling, because at that time I worked with Dr. Roberts, which was a brother of someone who was sailing in Tobago. And he wanted to be a physician. He wanted to be a physician operating in Tobago, a practicing physician in Tobago, and couldn't reach out to anyone. So through Dr. Remy and Dr. Wheeler, I was able to get that ball rolling. And subsequent to that, the medical side. So if anybody remember him, he was the first guy who were able to remove a gallbladder endoscopically from a patient in Tobago, the first ever, person to be able to do that. And that was a result of the equipment and the medical supplies that I was able to garner in the US to ship to Tobago. And I'm really I was happy about that. He was able to see a lot of patients. In fact, my sister was one of the recipients of that, and a young lady who the name is slipping me now, but she used to attend Bishop's High School, and she had a serious problem with her bones. In fact, let me back up. There were two incidents where I was able to assist persons living in Tobago with medical care because they had to come to the US. But I think I'm jumping different things here. Let me go back to, because there's so much to say. But basically, the question you asked me about, when I started, which is about 2001, and bringing the first team to Tobago. But prior to that, really, I accumulated all these supplies and equipment to come down. That first team consists of an orthopedic surgeon, a neurosurgeon, radio technician, radiographic technician, another surgical technologist, a dental technician, and myself was the first team. To be honest with you, I must tell you the stresses that it involved, because remember I told you that the operating room was not functional. But there were some surgeries already that Dr. Remy and Dr. Vila had lined up for this medical team. However, I arrived 1 week prior to the event because, to get things, to make sure everything was working right. And again, because of how the government worked, I had some serious challenges in clearing the items, the medical items that the team needed to work. So even on the day that that team landed at Crown Point Airport, I still was not able to clear the supplies, and they were supposed to start surgery the following morning. They were supposed to see patients the following morning. So you could imagine the stresses that I had, having a team on, on the ground in Tobago and not being able, going through this bureaucracy with the government and the THA to get these supplies cleared so the physicians and the doctors and the medical practitioners could work. So at any rate, with the necessary prodding of Dr. Remy and Dr. Wheeler and myself, we were able to get the medical supplies cleared just in time for the surgical date of some of these patients, which was a day or two later. So everything was just teeth biting right down to the end. Anyhow, we were able to see hundreds of patients during that time with all different kinds of complaints. I remember the hospital there was just so full, people waiting and all of that to be seen because they heard that these medical practitioners were on the island, and a lot of people with orthopedic problems were able to be seen. In fact, I must say that Ms. Cynthia Alfred, who was Secretary for Health at the time, she had fractured her ankle a couple of days before the team arrived. And she was one of the first recipients of that team to do surgery on her ankle. So that was perfect timing for her. At any rate, the team went on to have a successful mission, and that on their return, they discussed at the University of Connecticut all their experiences, and that brought more interest from the entire University of Connecticut and the surgical team and medical practitioners there. Once you have the will and perseverance and the need to assist people, I mean, you just have to cut through a lot of the bureaucracy and get it done. So that's my contribution for there from a medical standpoint, medical surgical standpoint. And I remember also donating. They had problems with sterilization, and even though it was a used sterilizer at the time, I was able to get that shipped down to Tobago to get items sterilized. I was able to get for colonoscopies, mostly a lot of endoscopy type equipment. Laparoscopies, Dr. Wheeler was able to use a lot of the equipment to do a lot of laparoscopy diagnostics, to attend to patients' issues even subsequent to the mission. So I think all in all, there was good benefit came out of these missions. I also were able to have an MOU developed between the Tobago House of Assembly Division of Health during the time of the same Cynthia Alfred and Mr. Adlington Spencer. And they had a team that came up to the University of Connecticut to create some synergies, yes. And, these are the things that just get lost by the way. And the people of Tobago is not the wiser because they don't know the efforts that people put in to improve the healthcare delivery in Tobago. And that fell by the way because of lack of interest on the part of the government. Because even though they came up as a team And we created a memorandum of understanding because the idea was to bring medical practitioners from Tobago to the University of Connecticut and vice versa. They will come down and do missions and create a really good synergy, the kind that I'm hearing that they're talking about now. You know, and this is the way that we have to go because the island really is not able to support all the medical specialists and specialties there that we will need to care for our residents or people on the island. And this is the best way that we can really bring in the technologies and the modern day type of patient care services that we need without relying necessarily on Trinidad and physicians coming up and all the drama that goes along with that with the inter-island transportation.
Another mission was led by Trinidadian Dr. Noreen Johnson, and her organization, Touch Tobago, made annual interventions in the realm of healthcare, as expressed in this interview with Dr. Maria Dillon Remy.
It is really a pleasure for me to be talking to you about this important contribution that Trinidad and Tobago members of the diaspora have contributed to Tobago's healthcare. I graduated only 45 years ago from medical school, 1997, and then 40 years ago as a pediatrician. I came to Tobago in 1997 as the hospital medical director. So I've been here now for 25 years. And during this time, I have been involved in several of the initiatives that have happened by Trinidad and Tobago diaspora who have come to Tobago to help with healthcare. And the one that I'm most familiar with is the one that started in 2001, actually 2002, by the Touch Tobago team. Now, Touch Tobago was pioneered by a Trinidad and Tobago obstetrician and gynecologist. She's from San Fernando, and it was interesting because we did our final year together in medical school. We met working with Professor Bartholomew at Port of Spain General Hospital. She had come from Howard University, and she was doing an elective here, and I was in my final year, and that is when we met for the first time. And then we were meeting again in 2001 when they came to set up the initiative. So I met her then for the first time, and her name is Dr. Noreen Johnson. Noreen got a team of doctors, nurses, nutritionists, lab technicians, people from different spheres within the healthcare field, and they provided services. Initially, they started in Charlottesville, but then they also contributed to other parts of the island. They went to Palo-Tuve, they went to Delaford in the early days. They also provided services at the hospital. So their involvement, and they used to come twice a year. Their involvement was very, I would say very impactful, because after the initial, let's talk about what happened in the community in Charlottesville. So they ran clinics in Charlottesville when they came, and initially they were at the Charlottesville Health Center. And there was a time when the health center was not functioning. They worked at the community center. But a couple years later, they got people from the United States to donate, let's say it was a theater suite. What they did was to convert a 40-foot container, and they outfitted it as a theater. So that container was packed with all sorts of things and brought to Tobago on a barge. When they got to Scarborough, they had to take it up to Charlottesville, and then it was offloaded in Charlottesville and taken to the location where they had land donated by Mrs. Turpin, and that it's at the bottom of the hill on the right-hand side when you come to the bottom of the hill before you turn right to go. That facility was donated by this group in the United States who wanted to support what was happening in Tobago. So after a while, they operated from that container. Well, not container, the surgical suite, which allowed them to do minor operations. And then with the Charlottesville people, they were able to put a waiting area and stuff like that so that people, they had everything was done thereafter from that facility. They had the surgical suite where they did minor surgery, and then they also had the areas where they actually saw patients and everything. Not only that, but Dr. Johnson was the one who would have initiated doing keyhole surgery, buttonhole surgery, laparoscopic surgery for gynecological problems at the hospital. So she would have been involved with the director, the medical director in OBGYN, Dr. Victor Wheeler, and they would have worked together to initiate keyhole surgery at the hospital for gynecology, and it was the first time that was being done. So it was a very, not just involved, but a very impactful intervention by that team. I also remember there was a time when she brought a pediatric cardiologist, and there was a Tobagonian nutritionist. She is from Mount St. George. I don't remember her name. She works actually in New York, and she used to come with the team every year. They did impactful work in Charlottesville. So I'm telling you, they came in 2001 to initiate. And let me say, because I think it's important, they came for their first mission trip in 2002 when they started in Charlottesville. And they carried out missions until, I would say, we are now 20 years after that. I would say probably for about 15 years. Dr. Bovell, who happened to be a classmate of mine at Bishop's High School, Adela Bovell, they have the Bovell Diabetes and Cancer Foundation, and they have done a lot of work in the community for diabetes and cancer screening and stuff like that. Actually, they're still operating. They are going now, this is their 14th year in Tobago. The people that I talk about, these people have come to Tobago. They have paid their own airfare. When they come here, they stay in hotels or in guest houses, and they pay for their stay also, for the most part. So they have been giving of their own, yes. And under the directorship of Mr. Lou Williams, they did do a lot of work with the hospital. They donated equipment, and they were involved in lots of advocacy for patient care at the hospital. So they are, I'm not too sure if they're functioning still. I know they went off into, one of the things that they contributed was the podiatry, dealing with diabetic foot care. Yes, because that was Mr. Williams's, his skill, he was skilled in that area, and he helped many diabetics in, and just not just diabetics alone, but he concentrated on diabetics and the aged in terms of their foot care. But they also would have, as I said, donated equipment, which I don't remember what and stuff like that, but they would have done a lot of advocacy for improving health care at the old hospital. And they were actively also involved when we were preparing for the new hospital and getting comments from the public. The Friends of Tobago Hospital and Healthcare was one of the groups that was involved in their input in how we put things forward for the new hospital.
In the 1990s, when HIV was still prevalent, the Tobago AIDS Society was able to draw on resources from people who were domiciled in the USA. And out of that emerged in 2002, Friends of Tobago AIDS Society. Miss Valerie Solomon, a co-founder of Friends of Tobago AIDS Society, gives some insights on the work of FOTAS.
Well, it really started in 1999. We actually came to Tobago in 2002. But this whole thing started with someone being infected with HIV. And at that time, the treatment was not good. And people were dying and there were no medications. So someone brought it to the attention of myself and my husband, Owen. And they literally were preparing for burial. And so we said, no, we can save lives and we would really like to help. And so that individual came to the US, got treated, and did excellent. But the turning point as far as Tobago is concerned, and I have to call her name, because this lady, she looked at this gentleman and she said, he has done so well, we cannot not look back. And that was the nexus of our initiative for Tobago. So Maureen Phillip, I must call her name, Maureen Phillip reached out to my husband and myself and said, let us do something for the people in Tobago. And Edwin and I said, of course. What we did was, for the first 3 years, we did fundraising. And we did those and sent the money to Tobago. Margaret Wright was the person who was very involved. So what we did, we sent her the money, we sent her medication. And we have done that we did that for 3 years. After that, we decided the same experience that I've had with those communities in the US with charitable giving. I thought myself and Clary Bacchus says, maybe we should try that in Tobago. We said, why not? Let's do it. And that is the beginning of our FOTAS initiative in Tobago. In Florida, other than Clary Bacchus, Maureen Phillips, Laurelyn Adebajo, we were the people who really began that initiative. Harvey McFarlane from New York, he came and joined us. And then he brought a whole group of people from New York, Aileen Kwashi among them. I mean, it was really a lot of people from New York that came one year. And they fundraised in New York also, because we've been to New York for a fundraiser. So it really did cross the border. It crossed the state. That's how we began in 2002. And that, what I say, it was not an easy thing. I mean, it sounds great and successful now, but it wasn't, because there was a lot of pushback from the people, because they were saying this was not the time to come, and this was saying, why don't you go somewhere else? And people also thought that everybody who participated in the walk were HIV positive, so some people did not want to come, but we were able to break those barriers. We were able to do that. And that was such a tremendous experience, because it really skyrocketed that whole movement for Friends of Tobago AIDS Society. They were seen and they were held. That was something that was extremely important to these people, because nobody wanted to touch them or talk to them. And we hugged those people. And that was a real phenomenal experience because they couldn't stop talking about they were held. They were held by people other than themselves, and they were accepted, and that was what was very important. The walk is from Dwight York Stadium to Store Bay, and people prepared to be able to make that. It was a half a marathon. So people were prepared. It was a good challenge. And we saw that in churches that went as a group. We saw that in schools that went as a group. So I thought that was very good in the sense that we now have people who are willing to do other kinds of charitable work for any specific disease. That's one of the things that I see. We set out to make people more aware of HIV/AIDS and its impact. That was done. The awareness was accomplished. And what we have been able to see is that the government was able to step in at a certain time to help these people. Before, they were unknown. Nobody knew about them. Now, medication was much more available. People were able to see some kind of help from the government.
In the arena of sports, qualified TT-born coaches were assisting in summer camps in several sports to improve the skills level of school-age children in lawn tennis, football, and basketball, among others. Exceptional talent would be tracked for possible places in U.S. colleges. In particular, sports philanthropy also included the supply of sporting equipment to local clubs and schools, like Sean Powder's initiative for Tobago tennis.
Well, tennis in Tobago, at one time when I was young, I was working for Arthur Ashe and Nick Bollettieri in the tennis business in the U.S., between Florida and California. So with a base office in New Jersey. So I always grew up playing tennis, lawn tennis, and at that time the program in Tobago needed some support through the Crusoe Isle Tennis Club and Tobago House Assembly. So we initially started by providing rackets, balls, ball machine, tennis nets. Then we got involved with some support of the coaches, and eventually, as the players developed, at the school age, we had a lot of children playing lawn tennis, school age in Tobago, and we developed the quality of coaching. We were able to assist with scholarships for many players abroad and to help navigate that. So I think not only did we get people playing tennis, but we were able to help in terms of the development of the human capital of Tobago by getting people through to university opportunities abroad.
In the area of sports philanthropy, in the early 2000s, there was an initiative, or a range of initiatives related to tennis, associated with Sean Powder. Sean Powder, who hails from Betsy's Hope, actually introduced some new resources to help the lone tennis club on the island. And in the final analysis, his efforts contributed to Tobago's domination of the age group lawn tennis during that period.
It started in '91 when we first met in '91, and Sean was at that time trying to make arrangement for us to access training at the Bollettieri Tennis International Center in Florida. But it never worked out. He was trying to do it through the Arthur Ashe. There was an Arthur Ashe Development Fund, and he was trying to access that. After that, he helped, I think it's around 95, somewhere around there, he helped 5 Tobagonians to access scholarships in the United States. And he continued his help towards Tobago by making a contribution of about 400 rackets, thousands of balls, basket nets to expand the primary school program. So in 1998, our primary school program peaked at about 1,800 children a week because of that contribution. Thereafter, we lost that kind of substantial support, and the program had dwindled. So we need something or somebody like Sean Powder to come back in and help us to continue this massive program that we had. Well, we dominated not only Trinidad and Tobago tennis. For instance, in 1993, we won, I think, 8 out of the 10 national titles, and that continued right up until 2005, where every national tournament Tobagonians would win like 6 out of the 10 titles. And every team that left during that time, 50% of the players would be from Tobago, if not sometimes, in some cases, all. It helped us in 2000, I think it's 2008, where 2 Tobagonians won silver medals in the HITIC tournament. And HITIC is classified as the highest level of tennis in this part of the world. So we had 2 silver medals, and all of that is because of the support we got from Sean over the years. And he still continues to support, because right now he has some nets and some balls waiting to be shipped to Tobago to help out our situation.
Business investment grew apace as Diaspora funded and owned business spanned many sectors. Tourism was the predominant industry for Tobago. Elsewhere, construction-related and service-based businesses had attracted Diaspora financing. Property developers emerged across the country as Diaspora investors sought healthy returns from building new living spaces. Concordia Estate was acquired by a Diasporan family and developed as a nature resort. President and CEO Beverly George Jordan.
I don't know that my interest has changed. I'm Tobagonian born and bred, barefoot mademoiselle. So when Tobago is in you, it's in the DNA, regardless of how you trek around the world. But what I think has changed in my approach is not necessarily the intensity of my interest, but more so, I decided that I would be a leader in the change and not wait on the powers that be, because they have their own issues to grapple with. So I said that if I could harness resources from family members and from different institutions out of Trinidad and Tobago, then I would use that know-how to bring money back into Trinidad and Tobago. So I've actually launched a campaign to the people who are close to me, my friends and my reach, in terms of the strategy of harnessing funds from wherever you're located to bring back to your home country. And sometimes it means taking the equity out of your home, but to leverage that to build the small little island that we've come from, that has been so good to us, even with all its imperfections. Having said that, so we, together in a consortium, we have done various investments, although I would not delineate or think for the purpose of privilege, but basically to say that whether it be in the tourism industry and the real estate industry, in the various industries, I am happy to be affiliated with the Concordia Estate project. So Concordia Estate Nature Park is a 50-acre estate. It was owned by the British for the last 300 years. Of course, it did change hands when the island changed hands, but our family were able to, through its investment company, were able to purchase the remaining of the estate and open it to the public for the first time. The intention is a mission to preserve the culture and preserve the history of what the estate is. And yes, the estate was a slave plantation, doing agriculture in crops like indigo, sugarcane, coffee, cocoa. So it was a dark history, but our mission aims to take what was a negative situation and put a positive spin on it so we can engage Tobagonians with the history, with the culture, and our guests from abroad. Our investment is in adventure tourism. So we really into the whole wellness, the whole being. So impact-wise, when people want to relax, recharge, rejuvenate, they come to the Concordia Estate. So that's wellness. Whether it be a river spa, whether it be the herbs, we have all of the herbs in the Amazon forest, and we're in the process of documenting with international scholars what those herbs are. So whether it be the herbs, the teas, the mud, we offer wellness. So there's a direct linkage between wellness and real estate. The real estate is just the channel through which we're able to offer the services. So our services are rangeful. And then we do like ATV rides, wagon rides. So I think there's a good synergy, a good linkages between what we do, tourism and health and agriculture. We've gotten visits from the THA officials, both the past officials and the new ones. What I do know, though, is that there is room for the THA to create or work with your diaspora towards harnessing a data bank of their investors. Because the truth be told is, I consider our initiative to be a great benefit to the island.
Horace Wilson, in the early 2000s, was a writer, producer, and director. He actually was the man who was behind the Turn of the Tide production in the 1980s and also No Boundaries. Wilson migrated to the US in the 1990s and continued his craft in the film sector. Ultimately, in 2009, Horace Wilson came back home and produced a movie on local soil, Happy Sad, a program that had a cast of people who were largely local and which was shot entirely in Trinidad and Tobago, especially Tobago.
It was shot almost, I think, entirely in Tobago. I don't think we shot anything in Trinidad. I'm not sure. I think, yeah. Anyhow, the director, as I said, is a woman called Diana Winter, who had directed some episodes of Soul Food a couple of years ago and a couple of TV movies. So I approached her with a script, and she liked the script, and we decided to do it. We approached the Tobago House of Assembly for some funding, they actually gave us some. I had a very good friend, Rodel Clark. He's now deceased. He had played Joshua Walker on Turn of the Tide, and we kept in touch all the time. And he was my producing partner, and we went ahead and did it. In addition to the director, we also brought from the US a director of photography, a guy called Johnny Simmons. Very, very good cinematographer. He actually won an Emmy for shooting something. He was nominated like 3 or 4 times for Emmys. And we brought an assistant director. We also brought an actor, Bill Cobbs, who is pretty well known. He was in The Bodyguard with Whitney Houston. He was in Night at the Museum. He was one of the guards. And, he's pretty well known. And he came down and we did it. Everybody else was local, the entire cast and crew. I wrote a script called Pan, which revolves around this, a steel band competition. And I entered it in a competition called Page Awards, which is very well-known competition. There were like 8,000 or 9,000 entries, and it came third in that contest. It was optioned by a production company in Los Angeles, and they tried to get it funded. They're probably still trying to get it funded, but it hasn't happened as yet. And then I did another script called Lara's Legacy, which is a little horror film, kind of, low budget type thing, which I entered in another contest called Scriptapalooza. That's another big contest that had, maybe 9 or 10, I don't even know how many thousands of entries. And it reached as far as the final 10. But in that contest, I think the horror script, Lara's Legacy, probably might be successful. I think that's probably has, because that's a genre. It has its own, audience, and most of them, do well. In fact,
I asked you to do one thing for me, one thing. Sign your name to help me get that football scholarship, and you would rather go past the edge.
Then fine, go and live with your father. You won't have no worries from me.
Father? What father? I don't want to go to Tobago with you, and I don't want to be a friend.
That's all right. That's the way you want to play it? That's all right.
What do you think she's seeing an old man like you?
I don't care what she sees. They're not seeing me. She makes me feel as if I'm a man. As if I'm alive.
You and who else?
So that's it. You're a jock. You like girls.
I am just trying to get back my life in order and stay away from trouble.
Yeah, but football season's over now.
Is that the girls' track team?
How great our God is.
I'd like to join the class.
I'm not taking anyone before the end of the day.
Suppose I could outrun your fastest girl.
Even in hard times.
You want to get away from the life of poverty that's staring you in the face, don't you?
I can't.
Do those 2 lifts or you're out of here.
I want to study in America.
I hope you're not expecting me to pay for it.
I don't expect a damn thing.
Sometimes the best you can hear is happy, sad.
It is undeniable that the Trinidad and Tobago diaspora, especially the Tobago diaspora, contributed significantly to social, cultural, and economic progress in Tobago over the last 60 years. And it is clear that it is suitable for them to be referred to as exemplars of patriotism, especially when one sees the contribution in sports, commercial investments, education, healthcare, and the creative arts. This is the end of part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 of Exemplars of Patriotism.